Many people do not enter conflict hoping to create more pain. They enter it hoping to be heard, respected, understood, protected, or reassured. And yet, in the very moments when these needs are strongest, communication often becomes most destructive. We accuse when we feel hurt. We criticize when we feel unseen. We withdraw when we feel unsafe. We demand when we feel desperate. We defend ourselves when we feel judged. In Nonviolent Communication, Marshall B. Rosenberg begins with a powerful recognition. Much of the suffering in human relationships is intensified not only by what happens, but by the language and mental habits people bring to what happens. When people are distressed, they often move quickly into blame, diagnosis, moral judgment, and demands. These habits may feel normal, even justified, but they rarely create genuine connection. More often, they provoke resistance, guilt, fear, or emotional distance. Rosenberg offers another possibility. He invites us to imagine communication not as a contest over who is right, wrong, innocent, guilty, strong, or weak, but as an attempt to understand what is alive in each person. What is being observed? What is being felt? What is being needed? What is being requested? This is the heart of nonviolent communication, often called NVC. It is both a practical method and a deeper shift in consciousness. It asks us to move away from language that punishes and toward language that reveals. At its deepest level, nonviolent communication is based on a humane and demanding vision. Rosenberg believes that human beings are more likely to contribute willingly to one another's well-being when they are approached with honesty, empathy, and respect rather than coercion, shame, or blame. This sounds simple, but it challenges many of the assumptions that govern everyday life. In many families, schools, workplaces, and cultures, people are taught to think in terms of fault, discipline, merit, obedience, and deserving. They learn to ask who caused the problem and who should be corrected. Rosenberg shifts the frame entirely. Instead of asking who is wrong, he asks what each person may be feeling and needing. Instead of asking how to make someone comply, he asks how to create enough connection that cooperation becomes possible. This is why the book feels deeper than a set of conversational tricks. It is rooted in a different understanding of human nature. Rosenberg assumes that beneath conflict, most people are trying to meet legitimate human needs, even if they are doing so in painful, ineffective, or harmful ways. When we can see that, our responses begin to change. We become less interested in punishment and more interested in understanding. We become less trapped in reaction and more capable of genuine dialogue. The book's vision is therefore not merely about speaking more politely. It is about reclaiming a more compassionate way of relating to ourselves and others. The first of the 4 core components of NVC is observation. Rosenberg emphasizes that many people think they are describing events objectively when they are actually mixing observation with evaluation. This matters because judgment tends to provoke defensiveness. If I say, "You are selfish, you never listen, or you are irresponsible," I may believe I am naming reality. But what I am really offering is a conclusion about another person's character or pattern. That conclusion may contain my frustration, but it does not create much room for connection. Rosenberg asks us to separate what we actually observe from the story we tell about it. Instead of saying, "You never listen to me," we might say, "When I was speaking just now, you looked at your phone and answered before I finished." The second statement is more concrete. It is less likely to trigger immediate debate over identity. The discipline of observation is powerful because it introduces clarity without accusation. It does not erase pain or remove standards. It simply helps us begin from something specific rather than something loaded. This can dramatically change the tone of a conversation. When people feel described as a problem, they tend to defend themselves. When they hear a clear observation, they have a better chance of staying present. Rosenberg's lesson here is subtle but foundational. The way we frame what happened shapes everything that comes after. If we begin with judgment, we often get conflict. If we begin with observation, we create the possibility of understanding. The second component of NVC is feeling, and Rosenberg treats it as more radical than it first appears. Many people are not taught how to identify or express feelings with clarity. They often use language that sounds emotional but is really interpretive. They say, "I feel ignored, I feel betrayed, I feel manipulated," or "I feel attacked." While understandable, these phrases often imply what the other person has done rather than naming direct inner experience. Rosenberg encourages a more precise emotional vocabulary. Instead of interpretive feelings, he points toward words such as sad, scared, overwhelmed, disappointed, lonely, relieved, embarrassed, grateful, hopeful, tense, or joyful. Why does this matter so much? Because when people speak from actual feeling, they become more honest and less accusatory. They stop presenting their pain as proof of the other person's badness. They reveal themselves more directly. This changes how they are heard. The listener is no longer being told what kind of person they are. They are being invited to understand an emotional reality. Rosenberg believes this shift is essential because feelings are one of the most direct ways human beings can meet one another honestly. Yet many people avoid them. They move quickly from discomfort into blame because vulnerability feels risky. NVC asks us to risk that vulnerability. Not because it guarantees agreement, but because it makes authentic connection possible. To say I feel hurt, anxious, or disappointed is often more difficult than to accuse. But it is also more human and often far more effective. If feelings are the second component of NVC, needs are the hidden core that gives those feelings meaning. Rosenberg argues that every feeling points toward a need being met or unmet. When our needs for connection, understanding, safety, rest, autonomy, meaning, or respect are nourished, we tend to feel more settled and alive. When those needs are blocked or neglected, we may feel angry, afraid, lonely, resentful, or discouraged. This is one of the book's most powerful insights because it changes how we interpret emotional life. Instead of thinking that other people directly cause our feelings, Rosenberg invites us to see feelings as responses to our own needs in relationship with what is happening. This does not deny that others affect us deeply. It simply places emotional understanding on a more honest foundation. If someone cancels plans at the last minute, the pain may arise not only from the act itself, but from needs for reliability, consideration, companionship, or trust. When we understand that, our communication changes. We become less likely to say, "You made me feel worthless," and more likely to say, "I am feeling hurt because I was really needing reliability and connection tonight." This shift matters because needs are more universal than accusations. Most people may resist blame, but many can understand a need for care, clarity, rest, fairness, or reassurance. Rosenberg believes that when needs become visible, conflict becomes more workable. We stop fighting only over behavior and begin to understand what life-serving needs are struggling for expression underneath it. One of the most illuminating distinctions in the book is the difference between needs and strategies. Needs are universal human qualities. People need safety, belonging, freedom, respect, understanding, contribution, rest, play, meaning, and choice. Strategies are the specific ways people try to meet those needs. Conflict, Rosenberg argues, usually does not live at the level of need. It lives at the level of strategy. Two people may share the same need for peace, but one seeks it through silence, while the other seeks it through honest conversation. Two people may both want security, but one wants detailed planning and the other wants flexibility. Two partners may both long for love, yet one wants more time together and the other wants more room to breathe. When people confuse their preferred strategy with the need itself, they become rigid. They imagine that if their method is not accepted, their need is being denied. NVC helps untangle this. Once people reconnect with the deeper need, more options become visible. The conversation becomes less about winning a particular plan and more about honoring what matters most underneath it. This distinction is incredibly practical because many deadlocked arguments are not truly about the surface proposal. They're about deeper values or needs that have become fused with one narrow path. By separating the two, Rosenberg creates room for creativity, flexibility, and genuine problem-solving. The fourth component of NVC is the request. Rosenberg insists that honest expression is incomplete unless it eventually becomes clear what action might enrich life. Many people are skilled at saying what hurts, what is wrong, or what they dislike, but not at making concrete requests. As a result, conversations stay vague, repetitive, and frustrating. NVC encourages people to ask for something specific, present, and actionable. Instead of saying, "I wish you were more supportive," which leaves much open to interpretation, one might ask, "Would you be willing to sit with me for 10 minutes tonight and just listen without giving advice?" The clarity of a request matters because it gives the other person a real opportunity to respond. But Rosenberg draws an equally important distinction between a request and a demand. A request allows room for a no. A demand punishes refusal, whether through anger, guilt, coldness, or moral pressure. This difference is essential because many relationships are shaped by disguised demands. People ask, but they are not truly open to the other person's freedom. Rosenberg believes willingness is more life-serving than compliance. If someone says yes because they are afraid of consequences, resentment usually follows. A true request, by contrast, is grounded in mutual respect. It expresses need honestly without turning the other person into an instrument. This is one of the most challenging and liberating aspects of NVC. It asks us to seek what we want without abandoning compassion. Empathy is one of the emotional centers of nonviolent communication, but Rosenberg gives it a very specific meaning. Empathy is not advice. It is not reassurance. It is not analysis. It is not telling someone how they should feel or what they should do next. Empathy is presence. It is the willingness to stay with another person's inner reality long enough for them to feel truly met. This can be surprisingly difficult because most people are trained to fix, explain, defend, compare, or solve. When someone is in pain, we often rush to say, "It is not so bad, I know exactly how you feel, here's what you should do," or "Let me tell you what really happened." Rosenberg suggests that these moves often miss the deepest need in the moment, which is simply to be heard. To listen empathically means to hear the feelings and needs underneath another person's words. If someone speaks angrily, the empathic listener does not hear only the accusation. They listen for the pain, fear, longing, or frustration underneath it. This does not mean agreeing with harmful words. It means refusing to stop at the surface. Rosenberg believed that many harsh expressions are tragic expressions of unmet needs. That phrase captures much of his compassion. When people attack, they are often suffering. If we can hear the suffering beneath the attack, we may be able to respond in a way that interrupts the cycle of defensiveness. Empathy, then, becomes not softness, but courage. It is the courage to stay connected to another person's humanity even when their language makes that difficult. One of the most transformative applications of NVC is learning how to hear painful language differently. Rosenberg observes that people often respond to criticism, blame, or insult in predictable ways. They counterattack, defend themselves, withdraw, or internalize shame. NVC offers another option. Instead of treating the other person's words as the final truth, we can listen for the feelings and needs that the words are trying, however imperfectly, to express. If someone says, "You never care about me," we might hear a need for attention, closeness, reassurance, or emotional presence. If someone says, "You are so controlling," we might hear a need for autonomy or trust. This way of listening does not excuse aggression, nor does it require endless tolerance. but it prevents us from collapsing the person into the accusation. It helps us hear the human signal inside the harsh form. This skill is difficult because when people are criticized, their nervous system often reacts immediately. Rosenberg's contribution is to show that with practice, a person can pause long enough to translate the message internally. Instead of hearing only judgment, they hear pain. Instead of reacting only to blame, they hear need. This shift can change what happens next. It can create a moment in which real contact becomes possible, where otherwise there would have been escalation. In that sense, empathy is not only a way of speaking. It is also a way of hearing through the noise of conflict. Rosenberg does not limit nonviolence to outer relationships. He also applies it inward. Self-empathy is a crucial aspect of the book because many people speak to themselves in ways they would never use with others. They call themselves stupid, weak, lazy, selfish, pathetic, or a failure. They replay mistakes as evidence of personal defect. Rosenberg sees this as a form of inner violence. It disconnects us from the needs and feelings beneath our actions and traps us in shame. Self-empathy offers another path. Instead of asking what is wrong with me, we ask what was I feeling, what was I needing, and what mattered to me in that moment. This does not remove responsibility. It deepens it. Responsibility becomes less about punishing the self and more about understanding the inner life clearly enough to make wiser choices. For example, if someone procrastinates, the usual inner dialogue may be harsh and accusatory. NC would ask what needs were present. Was there overwhelm? Fear of failure? A need for rest? A longing for support or clarity? By locating the need, the person becomes more capable of real change. Rosenberg's insight here is profound. People grow better not through contempt, but through awareness infused with care. A nonviolent relationship with the self creates more room for honesty, repair, and sustainable transformation. Another important theme in nonviolent communication is Rosenberg's critique of domination-based systems, especially those rooted in punishment, coercion, and control. He challenges the assumption that people change best when they fear consequences or seek approval. In his view, punishment may create short-term obedience, but it usually weakens trust and willingness. A child may comply, an employee may submit, or a partner may give in, but the internal quality of the relationship deteriorates. Resentment grows. Distance increases. Compassion shrinks. Rosenberg is equally wary of praise when it is used manipulatively. Compliments that are really attempts to shape behavior can become part of this same control system. He prefers appreciation that is grounded in genuine gratitude, where someone names what another person did, what need it met, and how that enriched life. The difference is subtle but important. In one case, language becomes a tool of management. In the other, it becomes an expression of connection. This theme expands the book beyond personal communication and into ethics. Rosenberg is questioning the very structures by which many people organize authority. He is asking whether human beings flourish more under fear and evaluation or under compassion and choice. His answer is unmistakable. Nonviolence requires that we stop treating people as objects to be controlled and start treating them as beings whose humanity matters. The practical relevance of empathy becomes especially clear in intimate relationships and family life, where emotional patterns often run deep and reactive habits become entrenched. Rosenberg's framework offers a way to shift repeated arguments into more human conversations. A partner who says, "You never make time for me," may actually be expressing loneliness and a need for closeness. A parent who says, "Why are you so difficult?" may be feeling overwhelmed and needing cooperation or support. A teenager who slams a door may be protecting needs for autonomy, privacy, or respect. MC does not magically solve these tensions, but it changes the terrain. Instead of arguing only about behavior, people begin to hear what matters beneath the behavior. This can soften both sides. It also helps people ask more clearly for what would actually support them. In families, where guilt and demand are often normalized, the distinction between request and coercion becomes especially important. Rosenberg's hope is not that everyone becomes endlessly gentle or agreeable. It is that people become more honest without being demeaning and more compassionate without losing clarity. In close relationships, this can be deeply healing because many recurring conflicts are sustained by repeated mishearing. Each person feels unseen, so each becomes sharper, and the sharpness makes seeing even harder. NVC interrupts that loop by bringing attention back to feeling, need, and empathy. Although the language of nonviolent communication can sound intimate and personal, Rosenberg also applies it to workplaces, institutions, mediation, and social conflict. In professional settings, people often hide needs behind role-based language, performance concerns, or passive resentment. Feedback becomes criticism. Boundaries become irritation. Requests become implied expectations. NVC offers a more direct and humane alternative. It allows people to name what they observe, what impact it has, what matters to them, and what they are asking for, all without unnecessary moral judgment. In mediation, the framework can help conflicting parties hear one another at a deeper level. Even when they continue to disagree strongly about strategy or policy, they may begin to recognize shared needs for safety, dignity, voice, fairness, or respect. Rosenberg believed this recognition could be powerful even in serious conflict. Not because it erases difference, but because it restores humanity where dehumanization has taken hold. This broader application reveals the moral ambition of the book. NVC is not only a private wellness tool. It is a way of changing how people relate across power, disagreement, and pain. It asks whether communication can become a site of restoration rather than escalation. That is a difficult aspiration, but it is one of the reasons the book has endured. One reason nonviolent communication can feel so powerful is also the reason it can feel hard. Most people have spent years, sometimes decades, speaking and thinking in the language of judgment. They have been trained to decide who is right, who is wrong, what behavior deserves reward, and what behavior deserves blame. Under stress, these habits return quickly. It is far easier in theory to speak from observation, feeling, need, and request than it is in the middle of hurt, fatigue, fear, or anger. Rosenberg understands this. NVC is not presented as instant perfection. It is a discipline. It requires slowing down when the impulse is to react. It requires curiosity when the impulse is to condemn. It requires vulnerability when the impulse is to protect oneself through attack. That is why the spirit of NVC matters as much as its structure. Without genuine care, the language can become mechanical or even manipulative. But with sincerity, it can gradually reshape relationships. Practice matters because this is less about performing the right sentence and more about building a new orientation to conflict. Over time, the questions begin to change. Instead of asking how to win, we ask what is alive here. Instead of asking who is to blame, we ask what is needed now. As the book unfolds, a deeper insight becomes visible. Nonviolent communication is not merely about avoiding harsh language. It is about trusting that beneath most painful interactions there is a more human conversation waiting to happen. Beneath anger there may be hurt. Beneath criticism there may be longing. Beneath withdrawal there may be fear. Beneath control there may be desperation for safety. Rosenberg invites readers to believe that if they can reach this deeper layer, something meaningful can change. This does not guarantee easy resolution. It does not mean all needs can be met fully or that every relationship can be repaired. But it does mean that conflict need not remain trapped at the level of accusation and defense. There is often more life underneath than the surface suggests. This insight also helps explain why NVC can feel so different from ordinary communication advice. It is not only teaching cleaner expression. It is teaching faith in the possibility of connection, even under strain. That faith is not naive. It is grounded in careful attention to what people most deeply seek from one another: understanding, dignity, care, freedom, contribution, belonging. When those needs are named, even imperfectly, the quality of the conversation can change. The person across from us is no longer just an obstacle, an offender, or a problem. They become visible again as a human being. Nonviolent communication remains influential because it offers a rare combination: honesty without blame and compassion without surrender. Marshall Rosenberg does not ask people to silence their needs, hide their pain, or pretend everything is fine. He asks for something much more demanding. He asks them to tell the truth in a way that preserves human dignity. He asks them to listen beneath attack. He asks them to become responsible for their own feelings without denying the impact of others. He asks them to replace demands with requests, judgment with curiosity, punishment with empathy, and control with connection. These are not small changes. They challenge some of the deepest habits most people carry. Yet the promise of the book is that these changes can transform not only what people say, but how they perceive one another. When we learn to hear feelings and needs beneath difficult words, we stop living only on the battlefield of accusation. We enter a more honest, compassionate, and workable kind of conversation. That is the enduring gift of nonviolent communication. It shows that conflict need not always produce more distance. With practice, presence, and courage, it can become a doorway into deeper understanding, clearer boundaries, and relationships shaped less by fear and more by humanity.